This is Let's Talk Call-In Radio. Getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day, this on-the-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join in today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or 8317. And your co-hosts today are Shelley Rugg on the board.
Hello.
Stephen Hurwitz.
Howdy.
And myself, I'm Paul Raffel. And when you call in, I'll tell you the topic soon. When you call in,
you'll hear a little sound.
You'll hear a little sound. As Shelley puts you into the system, hang on and wait till Shelley says, "Hello, caller, you're on the air."
Yes.
And then give us a name. Any name will do, but preferably your name. Turn your radio down so there's no echoing in the background. And please, watch your language. Keep it clean, keep it English. Okay. Today...
Yes, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about an idea that was suggested by my co-host, my lovely co-host, Stephen Hurwitz.
You don't call men lovely.
The fashionable Stephen Hurwitz.
And it's called Perpetual War. You sent me an email.
Yeah.
And it was an inspiration for the show. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was thinking, but, everything in the news, etc., is about the war, Afghanistan in particular. I think that had me going in this idea of, it goes back to Orwell and the idea of perpetual war. They had two warring establishments in the world, and they were always at warfare. I think that we've accomplished that. I think the way... I think we were in that state, and I think we've been in that state for some time. And, it's interesting. I was just thinking about that prior to World War II, the history of the United States was to disband the military after the war was over. It was only until World War II that we decided that we had to keep a permanent standing army, the Cold War, etc., and the world was divided up by the communists and the democracies, and so conflicts of one form and another have persisted, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and it's something that I think we should talk about.
Yeah, and of course the Orwellian thing about it is, especially during those Cold War days, is that if we didn't have an army that was always ready or was always fighting, then there would be no peace. So war is peace.
Yes.
And they're making America safe from when
the bad guys.
Then it was whoever the bad guys were. And going to Vietnam was to create peace in the world, stop the spread of communism, etc., etc.
I've always been against war. Ever since I was a little girl, it terrified me, the idea that my brothers might get drafted, etc. But I was thinking about it that, if we did, let's say we just completely stopped the whole military thing, then it would really leave us as sitting ducks if the bad guy wanted to move in. So I kind of get that, but at the same time, it's not really about the bad guy. It's more about money. And
I think people have been thinking that way for a long time, though. We cannot unilaterally disarm because that puts us vulnerable. But, we have, if you took all the defense budgets together, we're spending more money on defense than the next 10 countries. So,
It's actually more than that now, of course, because they just, for next year, $717 billion. That's without any incidental emergency funding like, oh, we're starting another war. Oh, okay, we'll give you some more money for that. That's how they do it, by the way. The Afghan war and the Iraq war were not included in the defense budget. They were extras.
And we're busy creating schools in Afghanistan when our schools here are deteriorating. Universities we've created, we've paved their roads. We put billions, maybe it's $1 trillion. What's the number now of how much money we've put into
It's over $1 trillion for Iraq and Afghanistan.
$1 trillion for Afghanistan. And, I brought that up in my notes to you, was that I was riding with a Afghanistani Uber driver. And he was in the country because we have a tradition that if you give us significant help during a war, then our doors are open to you when you're ready to retreat, so to speak. And he was one of those people who worked for the government for 5 years over there. And I said, well, do you think we're going to get out of Afghanistan? He said, no, I don't think it's ever going to end. From what I was listening to, it's a stalemate, which is a perpetual war in that sense.
Yeah.
So,
and he was worried about what would happen if America and the NATO forces left there, right? I mean, the warlords would take over, as he called them.
Yeah,
and it would be back to where it was before the Russians invaded.
When there were the warlords.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Back in the days when we were funding the Taliban and giving them missiles.
I love that photograph
weaponry.
of Osama bin Laden and Ronald Reagan sitting in the White House. But,
because it was the Russians, and, if the Russians did anything, we had to fund whoever was fighting them. And so here we are. We're in Afghanistan now, still.
Okay, but let's say the worst happens, quote unquote. Let's say the schools are closed. Let's say the Taliban takes over and institutes a heavy-duty Islamic nation where 5th century concept of society. Should we still leave? I mean, are we protecting some kind of a notion that Afghanistan needs to be modernized? It needs to come into the 20th century?
Well, we've done that before with other countries, not always to great effect. Usually by putting in the leaders we wanted to put, like Iran, for example, put in the Shah, put him in power, and all that fell apart because, you give a guy power and what happens? He becomes a tyrant and a despot and starts torturing his own people, and that gives people like the mullahs back then, gives them power. They say the right things to the people. Nationalism arises.
It gives them license.
And Iran becomes a
theocracy.
An Islamic state. Yeah, theocracy.
Well, I think there's a backlash right now in Iran, though. If you really want, that's a different subject. But I'm more cynical about things, I guess. Well, we know that, but I think that we're never going to get out of the defense budget, huge defense expenditures. Not because the United States needs all those weapons, which, by the way, get obsolete, so we have to renew our weaponry on a regular basis. But I think that they increase the defense budget because they provide good jobs in industries that are conveniently spread throughout the entire United States. Right. The representatives in Congress, quote unquote, bring home the bacon, which means more of these high-paid technological jobs that have to do with making weapons of war. So you reduce the budget. In a sense, you're telling one of these guys in Congress that, by the way, you're going to see a lot of unemployment in your district. I think we're just stuck with that.
Yeah, who's going to... Well, how many actually voted against it this time? 40 congressmen, I think, maybe Democrats. But no, it's a Yes, it's a huge boondoggle. It's a huge moneymaker for the U.S. War.
Right.
We love war, don't we? You're going to tell the workers of Northrop Grumman, sorry, you didn't get the contract for the new missile that we need to use. And this coming year, they are going to be buying all kinds of new weapons, including a new sidearm, by the way. They're no longer going to be using Berettas as sidearms.
You know, when they talk about...
Did you know they were Berettas? I didn't know they were Berettas. An Italian company making the handguns
Don't tell the NRA.
that our troops use. Now they're going to Sig Sauer, the German company.
Well, you know, in a sense, then, President Trump is questioning that whole dynamic, and he's saying, you know, why do we have to be here? Why do we have to spend all this money? Maybe this business of the United States being able to project power to any part on the planet at any given time. You know, we have this 11. I guess they're called aircraft carrier groups, and it entails dozens and dozens of ships, planes, etc. And they're in these specific groups, and I think we have 11 of them. And the next, Russia has, I think, 2. I think Britain has 3. We've got 11, which means, okay, we want to go to the Middle East and project power like we are. We just send one of these carrier groups, and it's a whole military setup, got all the toys.
They send them out to Diego Garcia in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and that is where the carrier base is for the Persian Gulf. Yeah.
Hey, guys, we have a caller. Caller, you are on the air. What's your name?
Sally.
Hi, Sally.
Oh, my God.
Just having a PhD in military strategy and political science that I do not have.
Join the club.
I know nothing. Just a spoiler alert there.
Why should you be any different than anybody else on this show?
Exactly. That's what this show's all about. We rely on our callers
exposing our ignorance
to chip in.
I just sort of feel like this is so complicated, this topic. And I do think on a basic level, I think if you say anything that the powers that be or the cognoscenti would say, oh, but you don't understand, you're oversimplifying it, of course, how can you understand the dynamics and what's involved?
Right.
And I think that's an age-old thing, like that the common populace we can't possibly understand. And
you can't handle the truth.
But I do think the eternal war is just a euphemism for it's just our taking over territory in a strategic place. And let's not forget these wars were waged under false pretense, and how
that's right.
The President Bush, I just don't get how he wasn't incarcerated for waging a war under false pretense when it's really common knowledge. And the other thing I feel about this is that when you go in and get involved in a war like this, Afghanistan, the never-ending wars, you render the place so vulnerable, so shattered and vulnerable under the guise of having to protect them forever. It's patriarchal. It's also the vulnerability factor is that then everything it's just a fodder. It's like really fertile territory then for the most heinous, crooked stuff to happen. Secondary. It's almost like secondary infection, like the heroin trade exploding again, and things like that. So I don't know. It's just I just wanted to complain a little.
Fair enough.
I mean, I guess I'm saying I don't think there's any compelling reason why we should be in any wars. Obviously, the fight against Nazism and fighting against that kind of, genocidal genocide and oppression of people. Oh, but why are we not helping out in Yemen?
Yeah.
What about
We are.
humanitarian aid?
Not
Why
helping,
can't we
but we're there.
Hmm.
I mean, Yemen, everywhere there's so many problems, and I don't know, why can't we come in as humanitarian rather than as, bombers?
Yeah, well, Yemen...
I guess we have to make humanitarianism bring in lots of money.
Well,
Yes,
right. It's all about
exactly.
military contracts.
Well, Yemen...
All that black market stuff that happens, in which I'm sure so many of the people in our... Well, I don't know. I'm going to sound all conspiracy theoretical here, so I won't go there. I just think that the criminals are so deeply intertwined on
Right.
so many levels with the powers that be that and that's where the complexity comes into play in my mind.
Right.
Well, and talk about corruption. The Defense Department is the only government agency that has never been audited. They're doing one right now with 2,400 auditors, I think, going through the books, but the books have been so fiddled and so corrupted over the years that the General Accounting Office could not offer an opinion on their accounts because they were unable to sort them out. So this year is the first time since, I think it was 1992 or something, there was an act passed that said government departments had to be audited, make sure they were spending the money right. And of course, we know the Department of Defense has billions of dollars just sort of lying around, billions of dollars worth of equipment, billions of dollars of boondoggles, and the famous gold-plated hammers and the $25,000 toilet and all that sort of stuff. The Air Force spent billions on a contract to maintain one type of jet engine without first getting any idea of a fair price. They don't. I mean, it's mind-boggling when they keep throwing money at something. Of course it's going to be corrupted, and of course it's going to get... And they're not going to want to give up that rice bowl, are they? I mean, they're going to be guarding that.
Well, the whole industry's not going to want to give up that.
No.
I mean, such a segment of the economy is dependent on that $700 billion a year pumped into the economy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, kickbacks, baby.
Well, I wanted to address a different subject in this as well, and that is that we have this all-volunteer army, which is something new, really, for maybe a decade, and I think that it's served to really undermine people actually taking a close look at what's going on. I think that when it's like they've opted for it, so how can I say that they know what they got into, and so it has nothing to do with me. And the protest in terms of has pretty much in many ways dried up compared to when I was in my 20s. We had the Vietnam War, and they were reaching out on the street and grabbing us by the collar and saying, "Hey, we want to send you over to Vietnam," and it was personal.
Yeah, right.
There was a lot of protest. We got 500,000 people on the lawns there in front of the White House, and
nobody's threatened by the volunteer army
today.
Yeah,
we really don't.
What's the impetus?
So I think we should reinstitute the draft.
Well, yeah, but they'll never do that because they have a willing lower class, working class.
Yeah, so
population
patriotism.
They're not going to give them a living wage except in the army.
You can get an education.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the way they sort of put it forward as the point of doing it is you get benefits and you get a wage and it's a viable economic
Lifestyle.
choice with an education, etc. But they don't tell you the part about, you're going to have to take, ciprofloxacin every day. Destroy, thereby destroying your life just from the antibiotics they're going to make you take every day or whatever weird stuff they foist upon these.
Right. They experiment on their bodies.
Not to mention the chemicals, depleted uranium, the radiation, all of that. And the fact that they're going to be out there killing people. That is their job, after all.
So it's a combination of
in a room,
propaganda and phony nationalism, essentially.
Yes,
yeah. And let's not forget the people. This is the really weird thing: the people that sit in the room and like operate the drones. And that's just bizarre and insidious.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be more of that. There'll be more artificial intelligence involved, so then people won't be so outraged because there will be fewer Americans getting killed. It'll just be robots and artificial intelligence and drones and, everything done from a safe range. Nobody will be getting killed on our side.
People were talking about why doesn't Trump just take Assad out, He'd be pretty easy to when he's driving around, just whack him with one of these... one of these missiles off of a drone. So I guess there's some kind of unwritten rule that the guy that's behind the whole nonsense can't be taken out, but you can take out his minions, so to speak.
Well,
can you imagine if all of a sudden countries started taking out leaders, assassinating them using drones? I mean, we'd be hitting it would be amazing.
This is the thing. So, as we know, our Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States of America has talked openly about why can't we just use the nukes? We've got them. Why don't we just use them?
Yes.
And he does not need any kind of authorization from anybody or take advice from anybody. All he has to do is turn to the guy with the football and the codes next to him and say, I want to launch a nuclear strike right before I get impeached or before the elections to prove how strong I am.
Oh, dear.
Right?
I don't think, I think so.
There's nothing to stop him.
Well,
and
there are things to stop him,
would
actually.
a trained... No.
People just don't push
all
the
the
buttons.
grandmas, could they stop him?
There's no... He has the power to give the order.
Yeah, I think that the...
a highly trained
I don't think
military
I don't think the
corporal,
Joint Chiefs
lieutenant.
of Staff are just... I don't think they just sit around and say, President called, let's destroy this country. I think there are people that... there might have been World War III. There was I could be wrong, but this is something I read. There was a captain of a submarine during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was told to launch the missiles, and he refused to do it. And thank goodness he did.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Sally, are you still there? Oh, Sally's gone.
Well, I think this started with a letter I sent you that was questioning this thing. Thank you for your service. And when did that? All of a sudden, there it is. And I'm wondering. I hadn't heard that. Most of my life, we weren't required to thank people for their service.
No, it's become the thing to say.
I know, but when did that
it's probably counterbalancing all the protesting. So when you've got a bunch of people protesting against the war, then the people who want to keep the war going need to send a message of patriotism. And we need to value the vets that served our country.
I think, it's also a way for us anti-war people to cover our butts and say we're not against the people in the army. It's only against the idea of waging war all the time. I mean, that's what it's about, right? Because there was so much backlash during Vietnam. The vets were always talking about how they were spat on and all this sort of stuff,
Yes, that's right.
And they continue to be spat on by our government, who's not...
Well, yeah. The dysfunctional VA and getting defunded. It's getting more money, but it's still defunding. That part of the military establishment is being defunded compared with the rest of the.
Is there anybody out there that will take issue with this?
Yes.
Well, we do have
with these lefties.
We have a caller.
On the same room.
Caller, you're on the air. What's your name?
Oh, I think my name's Charlie, but I'm not sure. Let me check my name tag. Anyway, it's good to go over this subject again. I'm glad that you're doing it. And, the military, ever since World War II, has been a sales pitch. I remember when I was growing up, November 11th, was called Armistice Day, because that was the day that the peace treaty was signed after World War I. Well, it's called Veterans Day now. And there's a hustle going on about veterans. I'm always of two minds. I don't understand why some of these people don't think this through and realize that they're being trained to kill and sent halfway around the world, supposedly, to protect our freedoms. But at the same time, if you showed me a human being that had been in a war and was incredibly damaged by it, I don't know if you guys saw that Ken Burns piece on Vietnam, but it's really useful to see. But war has been sold to us, and it started in a war that my dad fought in. I probably would have fought in, which was World War II. And ever since then, we've been, pitched, well, not only with, standing up and saluting the flag in, the second grade. And then I remember when Eisenhower added under God to it, too. That was another thing, how nationality and, being a good religious person was sort of added to it also. But I think the American public, if you look at it, it's been sold to us. Korea, bingo, right after World War II. And then ever since then, we've been at war, which you guys probably mentioned. But I just remember, and, I honor some of the holidays. I mean, I honor the 4th of July because I believe in independence. But, there are so many holidays, so to speak, that are dedicated to people that went to war.
Yeah.
It's like a hustle, and if you say anything against the quote unquote troops, you're a rotten commie, and you don't have the guts. And there's all these memorials for the people that fought, and I can't really argue with that too much. But where in this country is there any kind of a holiday that's dedicated to people for peace?
Yeah.
Okay, with
Charlie,
that, I'm going to interrupt.
Hang on just a minute, Charlie.
Just a moment. From Marin County Fire, this is KWMR, Point Reyes Station, 90.5. Current information about the Irving Fire in San Geronimo Valley as of 8:21 a.m. Thursday, September 13th. We've reached 90% containment. Crews are continuing with mop-up. That is extinguishing or removing burning material near fire control lines, preventing falling logs and brush after an area has burned, and monitoring for hot spots.
And can I just say to our firefighters out there, everywhere in Marin County and beyond, thank you for your service.
Definitely.
Really.
Yeah, everybody's always talking about the troops.
Our heroes in uniform. Those are the heroes in uniform. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, if I'm going to, tip my hat heavily to somebody, it would be a firefighter.
But I take your point about in fact, I kind of wanted to, I couldn't figure out finally how to phrase it, because I don't want to put them down, but that whole thing of thank you for your service that has now become so commonplace on all media that, anytime there's a vet, thank you for your service. It makes everyone who's a veteran a hero, right?
Yeah, and
as if they are all brave, as if none of them ever did a desk job.
Yeah, right. Well, in the Vietnam Ken Burns one, they said that 1 out of every 8 military people actually was in combat, and the other 7 were behind the lines. I mean,
yeah.
It's I don't know. It's
they're civil servants with weapons, basically. So
But that's right. And if you look at different countries, United States of all the countries needs more people behind the lines supporting the troops than practically any other country. But this business of thank you for your service, I think it's more appropriate to say so sorry for your loss.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a good way to put it.
Because there are so many losses that come fighting a war and being a vet, et cetera, broken relationships, loss of comrades who die, lost youth.
I was once in a Veterans Day parade, and that's exactly what I thought of. I thought of loss, and particularly as a woman, a lot of women left behind by their significant others or their dads or their sons. And it wasn't really a warm welcoming that I received in that parade. I represented a mother, a grieving mother, reading a telegram, letting her know the news of her loss. And people shouted at me, "Oh, cheer up. It's not so bad."
Wow.
So, my thought is, how
cheer
would,
up.
I mean, even though all of that's true about the loss, my gut tells me that people might be offended if you said, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss." What do you think?
No, I'm sure it would not be taken the right way.
Well, I think that
I'm gonna
the
try that and
emergence
see.
of women who were also in war. We did a play some years ago called "Piece of My Heart," which was about women in Vietnam. And at the end, they showed that there was actually a memorial in Washington, D.C. for the women. And many of those women were in triage. The people, the medical people, I mean, it's hard to make a comparison, but the medical people saw the absolute worst
That's right.
of what was going on. I'm not saying that, the people that were out there on the front lines, those soldiers were not taught how to fight in a jungle either, but that's another subject. But there is some recognition of what women did in sacrifice, and not just, typing behind the lines, but actually being near the front lines. And
nobody's called in about this, so I'm going to do it. Because you mentioned the Korean War. Aren't there some conflicts in the last, 50 years or so that were justified, that the United States got involved in, and you could look back and say it's a good thing we did use our military might? Can we think of some that happened? I would say Korea is one of them.
While we're thinking about that, I need to do with the underwriters, right? I do. Okay, KWMR is supported by our Calendar Club members and by Bear Valley Cottage in Olema. Information on this self-catering college available at bearvalleycottage.com. KWMR is supported by our listener members and by Building Supply Center in downtown Point Reyes Station, serving the local community and visitors with a selection of supplies for home and building projects, as well as gifts and goodies. More information at 415-663-1737.
Well, just in reference...
Hold on, one more. We're supported by our listener members and by the Inverness Volunteer Fire Department, providing safety and fire services for Inverness and its environs. Information about becoming a volunteer is available at 415-669-7151 and online at inverness.pud.org. And if you want to call in and join the conversation, the number is 415-663-8492.
Okay, 8317. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm going to get off and let somebody else talk. But in reference to what Stephen said, I don't know about the Korean War. It certainly was an invisible war. It seemed like World War II Junior, and hardly anybody talked about it.
Well, it depends how old you were at the time.
It was a United Nations police action, actually, not a war, right?
Well, it depends how old you were, Charlie. I remember, I remember people talking about it, and I remember there was this concern because World War II had ended, and now you had these kids, and they're going, "Oh my God, we're sending these kids back into battle," and so there was this. I mean, this was not, people felt this.
I don't know. Has there been a, quote, good war since World War II?
Police action, whatever you want to call it.
Well, yeah, and police action is curious because if the Congress labels something a police action, it means the veterans get a lot less benefits. If they declare a war, then, not that the military doesn't have enough money already, but the Congress and the president get to stiff the soldiers on a lot of the benefits that they're supposed to get.
They're already stiffing them on pay.
So, yeah,
get
Vietnam
like 2 cents an hour.
wasn't really a declared war, I don't think. They just gave the president the power to pull it off. But anyway, thanks a lot, you guys. I'll be
Thanks for calling in, Charlie.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Charlie.
for
Maybe we
all
can get
the
some other people
callers.
to call in.
And
Thanks.
so remember, people, call in. Don't just listen.
Thanks, Charlie.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Paul used these little quotation marks. I have
It's
to.
always good to do that on air in the studio. Look.
Have there been times when the United States military action was justified? We could look back and say, "Wow, I'm glad we did that."
Interesting question. Give us a call, 415-663-8492. Has there been
somebody
a
would call in and ask
justifiable military action? If you're going to
Would
take
take
out
a deep analysis, I think.
Osama bin Laden, I suppose, if he was really the mastermind.
I'm talking on a larger scale than going after one guy.
I think once you get into a larger scale than taking out the head of an organization, it becomes open to all the terrible things that we're talking about. That these actions, other people get killed, civilians get killed. Collateral damage, all that stuff that goes along with military actions, because they get messy and scary and awful, and people die. I mean, that's the business they're in.
Well, I think Bill Clinton said that the one thing he regrets about his pregnancy is that he did not go into Rwanda during the what was it, genocide?
Yeah, the ethnic cleansing. Yeah. But they didn't go into Burma, into Myanmar recently either.
Yes, I know. I'm just saying that. Oh, pointing at my. I'm just saying that this is one of the things he regretted.
Right.
And so, maybe there are times then that United States firepower becomes something that we're glad we have.
Is that, I mean, it's callous. Is it our job? Is it a country's job to go into another country and start killing people there?
It sure seems like there's enough work to do right here.
What, supposedly for humanitarian cause?
So you're an isolationist in that respect.
I suppose I am. I'm just basically anti-war, so But what then? We'd still be in Rwanda probably, and we would have done awful atrocities, and we'd be, why do they hate us? It would probably have been taken over by some other radical group that would then be wanting to kill American civilians.
So the answer to my question is no.
I don't think so.
Okay. Anybody out there?
I can't think of one, but yes, please do give us a call, 415-663-8492. Tell us all your opinions, any of your opinions about the ongoing wars that the U.S. has been involved with for a long time now, and whether there's been a justifiable military action that you can think of, other than life-saving missions, which is, that incredible force of human beings and skill and equipment that could be put to so much good use. Instead of going into Rwanda and killing a bunch of people, you could go in there and, I don't know, send educators in, send food.
Builders.
What caused that rift between the Hutus and the Tutsis? What was the basis of that? Was it over farmland? Was it over resources of some kind? If so, then let's spend $70 trillion or $70 billion on giving them what they need and then de-escalating.
That's a little naive.
What?
Oh.
A lot naive.
Okay.
Call in and share your opinion. 415-663-8492.
I mean, let's take
the Tutsis and the
Yugoslavia,
Hutus.
the former Yugoslavia. We were in Bosnia bombing people. Which side do you choose? Who's worse, the Croats or the Serbians, right?
Or the Americans?
Or the Americans, yeah. I mean, you pick a side, and suddenly they're the good guys. So you start killing the other people. Because
there's got to be more to this
who
story.
happen to be Muslim, by the way. But but there were terrible things happening in Bosnia. The leaders in Bosnia were doing genocide, ethnic cleansing, and that's the basis for our involvement for it. But I don't know. Who do you choose to kill?
Well,
If not just the guy at the top who's giving the orders and his
That would
generals.
be more efficient, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it? And they're always talking now about surgical strikes, which, that never happens because, strikes involve missiles and bombs, and they can be a little messy. And drones, of course.
well, wait a second, though.
We're forgetting about the Space Force.
Oh, yeah, well. The world, though, is, what's the word? Tell me. Anyway, it's
What are you trying to say?
Well, what I'm trying to say is this. There is a balance, and like today, Trump is in the process of changing the balance on the side of Putin and Russia. So by withdrawing it's from certain areas, it's not that everything's going to be okay there now. It's creating a vacuum that the Russians and the Chinese are moving into, and that's a whole other thing. So it's not. So there are repercussions. So it's not. There are
to withdrawing. You mean?
That's right. It's just say, well, we're going to get out, but there's a secondary aspect to that is that they're going to come in. I'm not bad, good. Let the Russians waste their money instead of us.
Right. They've already done that in Afghanistan.
You could say that. Just bringing that up.
Why us? Why the U.S.? What makes us better arbiters of truth and goodness in the world? Just because we happen to be nice, us three in this studio?
Do you know how well funded our military is?
Yeah, exactly. The Taliban has occupied more land in Afghanistan than since the beginning of the entire thing. They're now in control of 40-something% of Afghanistan, which is higher than it's been since the whole thing began. So what? We've failed. We are failing. They've sent more troops in, a few thousand more troops in to be advisors. But, what are we doing there? Everyone knew about this, too. The Brits kept saying, Afghanistan, we was there. It wasn't fun. It's not going to work. And sure enough, the Russians were there. They pulled out. Here come the Americans. Yeah.
Well, I think if we pulled out, they might become a trading partner sometime. Look what happened in Vietnam.
Of course.
They're now making our T-shirts for us.
Yes.
Well, so the piece of pie. Yeah, what's the piece of pie that they're getting out of it?
On the other hand, the New Yorker had an article about what would happen when we withdraw from Afghanistan, and what they pointed out was that there actually are 5 separate ethnic groups in Afghanistan. It's just not like that's the name of it, but it's not. There is not a unified identity, and these ethnic groups have been divided up territorially, and they in the past have been ruled by warlords, and each time that there's been a withdrawal of foreign troops, they have returned to that system. So they were suggesting in that article that that is what's probably going to happen again. Well, possibly going to happen again.
So they'll go back to the way it was before all the white people from Europe and America came in and started bombing them.
That's right.
Maybe they should be that way, or even divide Afghanistan up into 5 different nations, if that's the thing, like they did with Yugoslavia. These artificial borders that are made up by somebody, probably by Brits.
You're assuming that it's our business to divide it up.
No, not our business. Their business.
Oh, well.
Our business is to get the hell out of there. I say. Because what are we doing? How many killed? let's see, Americans. I mean, the estimates of Afghanis and Iraqis killed, who knows, because who's counting? Nobody's counting. Certainly not on our side. 6,900, so almost 7,000 Americans have died, 53,000 wounded in action.
And how many of the...
for what? The Taliban is taking over again. So what was it all about? Let's just get out of Hanoi. Oh, no, I'm sorry. What's it called?
Kabul. And yeah, they can get back to supplying us with poppies, heroin.
I think that was part of the deal that the CIA...
the pie.
Back in when we were there in full force, the CIA was actually helping the poppy industry. But, that was just a rumor. We wouldn't do anything like that, would we? No. So the toll in human life on every side. How many hundreds of thousands of people, civilians mostly, we've killed? Oh, sorry, it was a wedding. We thought it was a ISIS training camp. Oh no, it was a wedding.
I have a nephew who came home and lost both his legs. Really young, good-looking guy, whole life ahead of him, and now he has two, what are they called? Prosthetic legs. But he has a beautiful, nice new pickup truck that the military provided him for his service.
Excellent.
Because of his severe wounds.
Well, I haven't quite understood that. You get some people who get tremendous amount of rehabilitative care, like you said, and then there are other, maybe mental illnesses. You can't point your finger at it. You can't touch it.
Right, you can't put a brace on it.
You can't see something missing. Where in fact, if you are mentally ill, you have a huge traumatic impact. You get 6 weeks of a little counseling, and then off you go.
Yeah,
you're not a hero.
Life destroyed.
If you have
of course, I'm
shell
totally
shock,
wrong about that.
Shell shock, as they used to call it. If you have PTSD, you're not a hero because you couldn't take it.
Yeah, sign of weakness.
Couldn't take it, man.
Sign of weakness.
And then there's, of course, there's Agent Orange. The sicknesses from Agent Orange and from depleted uranium, which finally Department of Defense actually owned up to Agent Orange, and they're sort of treating people, but most of them are dead already. Depleted uranium, radiation sickness, and no. We wouldn't allow our troops to be exposed to such terrible dangers. Not like that. No. Right. So, yeah, it's a terrible, corrupt, killing organization. It's
Mm-hmm.
but if we don't support it, we're looked at as being unpatriotic.
Unpatriotic, absolutely.
We're not just supporting it, though. We are adding support. This administration is increasing the budget, not necessarily
by $54 billion,
and not necessarily at the request of the military. They didn't ask for that money.
No.
Oh boy.
$54 billion extra next year.
Peanuts.
Just imagine,
Peanuts.
School system.
Not
As you
if
said,
you have
student
nothing to
loan
eat.
debt. You could pay off student loan debt over and over and over again, just with a mere portion of that.
Yeah, not if you have nowhere to live.
Yeah, exactly. So much good that could be done with our tax dollars that are going to that. The biggest, of course, expenditure of tax dollars is Social Security, which is why they're going after Social Security and entitlement reform. Whilst giving handfuls of cash to an organization that has never been audited.
Wow.
I don't know. It's just good business, right? I mean, that's why we're doing it, isn't it, really? The cynical view of it isn't to keep America safe. It's to keep America corporations working.
No, it's for our freedom.
It employs people.
I think and export dollar. We are the chief exporter of weapons on the planet,
right.
And I think that that's a huge factor in our budget. We're making a lot of stuff that we can ship over to our friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Give us a call, won't you? We have a few minutes left. 415-663-8492. Are we just going on and on and on and denigrating our our heroic boys and girls. And the Department of Defense, which is, how could it possibly be a corrupt organization?
You mentioned the CIA, though, and I think that these conflicts, many of them are, I'm talking about stuff I have no idea. This is what I vowed not to speak authoritatively about something I don't know anything about. So if I'm doing that and call, if you catch me on this, which is probably about 10 times a day,
give us a call on the
Hurwitz, what the heck
are you talking about line? Yeah, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that I heard, this was a long time ago, though, one of these guys said, blame it on the CIA. Even if you're wrong, you're right. Meaning they're up there. If there isn't a conflict, we're out there manufacturing it in some instances.
Certainly true back in the mid...
it's your turn to
1900s.
Talk authoritative.
Back then. Central America, South America, Middle East. Department of Defense, nation's largest employer. 1.4 million active duty personnel, 1.1 million reservists, 861,000 civilians, 450,000 employees stationed overseas in 163 countries. An additional 3 million Americans receive income from Department of Defense.
I'm curious about how God fits into all of this war stuff. It seems like there's a lot of...
he's on our side.
There's a lot of agreement between highly religious groups and war people that it's a good thing. And I wish somebody could call in really fast and help me understand. If you are a good Christian and you love Jesus and all of that, how can you support us going into war? And that's something I always struggle with personally.
Boy, you want to bring up a heavy duty topic in
the last
with
6
minutes
to go.
Yes, call in.
But yes, that's certainly been since World War I anyway. It's always been, the chaplains up there exhorting the lads to go over the top and in the name of God.
Goes back way before that.
Yeah, but for the Americans, it's been that way for quite a while. Yes, contractors. Let's see.
Talking about contractors, that's something that's been challenged by the troops. They say that they are hiring contractors in Afghanistan and paying them $50 an hour when the troops could do it, and they're getting paid it comes out to $7 an hour, and they're saying, look what's happening. We could do that job, and they're drastically overpaying it. By the way, some of that is Betsy DeVos's brother's deal, Blackwater.
Exactly. Blackwater, as it used to be. Now what is it now?
Yeah,
flowers and daisies and lovely pretty things, I think it's called now.
So that's another... we're farming out war to private contractors.
Huge business. And terrible business. And taking away resources from our country and other countries, destroying other countries, and all in the name of peace. War is peace. Don't forget that. This has been Let's Talk. Thank you to all the listeners and our callers today. Tune in every Thursday at 11. And please do call in. We'll come up with another topic next week, and you can all call in to the show. I wish to thank all our listeners. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you,
it's
Shelley.
Been a pleasure being here today.
As always. We'll leave you with a little music, and we'll see you next Thursday. Bye for now.